This is Bone Chillers to disturb your dreams. Dare to join us? Click subscribe, ring the bell. But remember, we cannot guarantee your safety from the nightmares that await. Prepare to be thrilled, chilled, and filled with a sense of dread you'll find nowhere else. Welcome to the darkness. We've been waiting.
The flesh we heal. My sisters and I, all draped in the sacred garb of medical practitioners, held a secret darker than the depths of the human psyche. The Valence sisters, revered in the corridors of St. Ellsworth's Medical Centre for our surgical brilliance and compassionate bedside manner, shared a primal, ancient bond that went beyond blood, a covenant written in blood. Claire, the youngest, was the one who unearthed our ancestral secret. During a research sabbatical in Europe, she stumbled upon an ancient tome buried within the catacombs beneath a medieval medical school. The text spoke of doctors who believed in absorbing the vitality of their patients, not just healing the sick, but consuming their essence to stave off death itself. Fascinated, Claire brought these dark traditions back to us. As the middle child, I was skeptical at first, but curiosity overcame my initial revulsion. Eliza, the eldest, saw it as an opportunity to transcend our human limitations. We began subtly, selecting those already on the brink of death, those whose lives hung by a thread and whose absence could be easily obscured by the shadow of natural expiry. It was a twisted form of mercy. At least that's how we justified our actions in the quiet midnight discussions that followed our operations. The night we chose Mr. Henley was draped in a chilling fog that seemed to seep through the walls of Eliza's stately manor in the countryside. Henley, a widower with no living relatives and an array of failing organs, was our chosen participant for the evening. His last breath under the sombre hum of life support machines was both an end and a beginning. "Sisters, are we not simply accelerating the inevitable?" Eliza whispered as she prepared the ceremonial space in her basement, her hands steady and sure. "In his passing, he will sustain us, nurture us. Is this not another form of healing?" By candlelight, we transformed the sterile basement into a sanctum of our forgotten rites. The body was prepared with clinical precision, yet there was a certain reverence in our touches. Each organ, each slice of flesh was harvested with a ritualistic care that belied our medical training. As I partook of the heart, the organ I always claimed as the cardiologist among us, the rich copper taste filled my senses. The heart, the symbolic seat of life, seemed to beat with a weak echo against my palate. Claire and Eliza, each indulging in their chosen portions, shared glances that spoke of both exhilaration and terror. This was our life, a macabre cycle of healing and consuming, saving and damning. We justified our actions with the belief that in consuming the dying we were merely part of the natural order, predators disguised in the white coats of healers. Yet, as our secret feasts continued, the strain began to show. Detective Marlowe, who had been investigating a series of unexplained disappearances connected to St. Ellsworth's, started to piece together a pattern. His eyes, sharp and probing, often lingered on us a moment too long. "Dr. Valence, may I have a word?" Marlowe's voice would often startle us during our shifts, his sudden appearances becoming more frequent. "Of course, Detective," I would respond, maintaining a calm exterior while my heart raced with the fear of discovery. It was inevitable. One crisp autumn evening, Marlowe arrived unannounced at Eliza's manor, warrant and backup in tow. We were caught off guard, our latest ritual barely concealed in time. As he descended the stairs into our basement, the air thick with the iron scent of blood, his face contorted in horror at the sight of our macabre paraphernalia. "What is this? What have you done?" Marlowe gasped, his hand reaching for his gun. Eliza, ever the protective eldest, stepped forward. "We heal, Detective, in ways the world isn't ready to understand." The confrontation was swift. Marlowe, though determined, was no match for the desperation of three women cornered by their own sins. He fell to the floor, a look of betrayal etched on his features. "We shall heal him too," Eliza declared solemnly as we stood over his lifeless body. "In death, he will join us, sustain us." That night, we crossed a line from which there was no return. Consuming Marlowe was more than an act of survival, it was an admission of our damnation. As we partook of the detective's essence, the full weight of our deeds settled upon us. "We are lost," Claire murmured, her voice barely a whisper over the crackle of the candles. "No," I replied, feeling the dark truth of our legacy coil tighter around us. "We are merely continuing what has always been. We heal, we consume, we endure." And so we embraced our fate woven from the fabric of human frailty and ancient rites. Our lives, a delicate balance between the ethereal glow of life-saving surgeries and the shadowy indulgence of our darkest cravings, progressed beneath the guise of normalcy. Yet the consuming guilt was as relentless as our hunger, a constant reminder of the monstrous paradox we embodied. The act of consuming Marlowe had indeed sealed our pact with a fate that was both inevitable and terrifying. We had become the embodiment of the very essence we sought to master, life and death in our hands, indistinguishable from one another, intertwined in a grim dance of ethical ambiguity. As the weeks passed, the hospital corridors, once a haven of solace and healing, now echoed with the silent screams of our conscience. The faces of our colleagues, the grateful smiles of our patients, all seemed to mask an undercurrent of suspicion. Were we paranoid? Or had our secret begun to manifest through the very pores of our existence? The police investigation into Marlowe's disappearance intensified, but with no body and no evidence directly linking us to any crime, it languished. We watched, each day, as the net of inquiry grew wider yet increasingly futile. Detective Marlowe had been thorough, his notes meticulous, but they yielded no definitive proof, only conjectures and half-guessed truths about the disappearances related to St. Ellsworth's. Eliza, ever the strategist, proposed a chilling solution to secure our legacy and safety. "We must leave," she declared one stormy night as we gathered in her study, the rain tapping against the glass like morbid applause. "Our talents, our needs can find solace in a place less constrained by the modern moral compass." Relocation was a drastic measure, but the alternative, a slow unraveling of our lives under the watchful eye of the law, was untenable. We planned our departure with the same meticulous care that marked our other, darker preparations. A month later, under the cloak of darkness, we left behind the world we knew. A remote village in the Andes, where local superstitions blurred the lines between science and myth, became our new home. Here, the boundaries we had once pushed in secret were part of a broader, more accepted tapestry of existence. We continued our medical practice, our expertise in life-saving procedures, earning us a revered place within the community. Yet our nocturnal rites no longer required the stealth and shadow of our past lives. Here, the cycle of life and death was respected, even revered, and our integration into these rites was seen as a natural extension of our healing abilities. As years turned to decades, the memories of St. Ellsworth's and the horrors of our past became like distant dreams, half remembered and fading. Yet the essence of what we were, what we had always been, remained intact. We were healers and consumers of life, guardians of a secret so profound that it transcended the moral judgments of the societies we had left behind. In this new world, we found not absolution, but a place where our dual natures could exist in open, where the flesh we healed and the flesh we consumed spoke not of horror, but of a deeper understanding of life's fragile, fleeting beauty. And so we endure, suspended between the divine and the damned, an embodiment of the most profound and terrifying duality known to humanity, that to save a life, one must understand the depths of death.
The Grinning Night. In the sleepy town of Maple Hollow, life moved at a languid pace, with days blurring into one another beneath skies that seemed eternally grey. The town, nestled in a forgotten crease of the world, was surrounded by thick woods, their shadows deep and brooding even at noon. Here generations of families had grown, their roots as deep and gnarled as the ancient oaks lining Old Mill Road. But as autumn approached, bringing with it the crackle of dried leaves and a crispness to the air that hinted at coming frost, a palpable change swept over Maple Hollow. The nights grew longer, the darkness more assertive, and with it came whispers of unease that rustled through the town like the wind through dead leaves. The first to notice the change were the children. Jimmy Donner, a freckle-faced boy of 9, swore to his mother that he had seen a clown in the woods, its face a ghastly palette of white and red, its smile too wide, too hungry. His mother, Patricia, soothed his fears with a smile and a dismissive wave, attributing it to an overactive imagination fueled by the approach of Halloween. But soon other reports trickled in. Ethel Mays, who lived alone since her husband's death, spoke nervously at the town meeting about shadows moving in her backyard and shapes that seemed too deliberate to be tricks of the light. Her voice trembled, her eyes darting to the windows as though expecting to see that grinning visage pressed against the glass. It was at the stroke of midnight on a particularly chill October night that the entity made its first undeniable appearance. The O'Hara family awoke to the sounds of laughter, not the joyful laughter of a family gathering, but something hollow and mocking. Outside their window, under the wan light of the street lamp, stood the clown, its eyes like coals, its grin slicing the night. It waved slowly, its hand moving with an unnatural jerkiness. From that night on, the entity, known among the townsfolk simply as Grin, became a malevolent fixture. It had an uncanny ability to exploit each person's deepest fears. To Jimmy, it appeared as the clown he had first seen. To Ethel, it was the twisted, decaying form of her late husband, beckoning her to the grave. The entity seemed to feed on their terror, growing bolder with each encounter. It would appear at windows, walk alongside people as they hurried home in the twilight, its footsteps silent, its presence chilling. Despite attempts to confront or capture it, Grin was always one step ahead, vanishing into thin air as if it were nothing but a bad dream. Determined to rid their town of this nightmare, a group of families led by the Donners and the O'Haras decided to confront Grin together. Armed with flashlights and old tales from the town's library about spirits and their weaknesses, they ventured into the woods one night, where the entity was most often seen. The deeper they went, the thicker the fog seemed to become, swirling around them like living things. Shadows danced at the edge of their lights, and every snap of a twig sounded like a bone breaking. When they reached the heart of the woods, where the trees were so dense that they seemed to swallow the light whole, they found it, Grin, waiting in a clearing. The clown's costume was grotesque, a patchwork of tattered fabric, and its face was an abomination of makeup smeared as if by a child's hand. Its smile never wavered, even as the townspeople encircled it, their faces set with determination. "Leave Maple Hollow," Patricia Donner said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "You have no place here among the living." The clown tilted its head, considering her words. Then, in a voice that was an amalgam of cries and whispers, it replied, "Can one ever truly escape their fears?" With a sudden terrifying shriek, it lunged at them, but the people stood their ground, shining their lights directly into its face. Under the beam, its features seemed to melt, to distort, until with a final, ear-piercing wail, it vanished. After that night, the air in Maple Hollow seemed lighter, the shadows less oppressive. Children played once again with abandon, their laughter genuine and unshadowed by fear. But the people of Maple Hollow never forgot the long nights of that autumn, nor the face of Grin, a reminder that sometimes the deepest fears lie within, waiting for the night to give them shape.
The grafting of souls. In the year of our Lord 1826, in the concealed bowels of my London abode, I laboured over the grand enigma of life and death, compelled by an insatiable quest to unravel the divine tapestry that binds the soul to its mortal coil, a pursuit born not of malice but of the raw, untamed curiosity that so often leads mankind into the cavernous depths of the forbidden. Mine was a solitary endeavour. My dear Elizabeth, once a beacon of warmth and serenity, had succumbed to the relentless grip of consumption the previous winter. Her demise had planted within me a seed of obsession, a fierce yearning to conquer death itself. Night after night, I toiled, surrounded by the macabre array of my instruments and the cold, silent company of the dead. I had discovered, through meticulous study and numerous experiments, a peculiar fluid, a conduit of vitality. This elixir, when introduced into the lifeless, seemed to whisper promises of resurrection. It was on a storm-ridden night, amidst the thunderous applause of the heavens, that I resolved to undertake my most audacious experiment yet, the reanimation of a composite being, pieced together with fragments of the once living. My creation was to be a tapestry of humanity, a testament to the ingenuity of man. With trembling hands, yet a steadfast heart, I began the arduous process. Limbs, sinew, and organs, all meticulously selected and preserved, were joined under the ghastly glow of candlelight. As the storm reached its furious crescendo, I administered my elixir through the conduits I had embedded within the grotesque form. With a sudden flash, as if the very heavens had cast their judgment upon my abode, life, unnatural and trembling, seeped into the fibres of my creation. Its chest heaved with a laborious breath, and its eyes, those pale, depthless orbs, flickered open with a confused, haunting gaze. The enormity of my transgression crashed upon me like the relentless waves of the ocean. What had I done? In my blind hubris, I had not only sought to mimic the Creator, but had fashioned an abomination devoid of soul and understanding. The creature, monstrous in form and uncertain in its nascent consciousness, staggered to its feet, its gaze wandering, lost and pained. In the weeks that followed, my creation roamed the shadowy alleys and hidden corners of London. Its presence alone was enough to sow terror, but it was the violence of its confusion and the agony of its solitude that led to tragedy. A string of ghastly incidents ensued, tales of a nightmarish figure assaulting those who crossed its lonesome path. Each report pierced my heart, for I knew myself to be the architect of this horror. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the cobblestone streets, a dreaded confrontation occurred. I encountered my creation, lurking in the dim light of a gas lamp. Its visage was twisted, not by malice, but by an agonizing yearning for acceptance and understanding. "Why?" It spoke, its voice a harsh, grating echo of humanity. "Why create me, only to cast me into a world that holds no place for me?" I stood, frozen, the weight of its words crushing me. I sought to conquer death, I confessed, to bring back those lost. But I see now that I have only spawned a new form of suffering. You are neither alive nor dead, belonging neither to light nor shadow. The creature's eyes welled with something akin to tears, a human gesture that twisted the knife of guilt deeper into my soul. "Then let me end this torment," it implored. "Release me from this existence you have so cruelly thrust upon me." Heartbroken and defeated, I led my creation to the secluded banks of the Thames under the cloak of night. There, amidst the whispered secrets of the rushing waters, I granted it its final grim request. As the creature sank beneath the surface, its haunting gaze remained etched upon my memory, a stark reminder of the price of playing God. Years have passed since that fateful night, and the spectre of my creation haunts me still, a relentless shadow that lingers in my every waking moment and invades my dreams. The horror I unleashed upon the world, a horror born of a desire to transcend the natural order, serves as a chilling testament to the folly of man's hubris and the profound consequences of tampering with the mysteries best left to the divine. Thus, I pen this account as a solemn warning to those who may tread the path I once walked, a path paved with ambition and sorrow. Beware the allure of forbidden knowledge, for it leads only to despair and ruin. May this tale of my suffering and the suffering I caused serve as a guiding light to those who would dare defy the boundaries set by our Creator.
The remnants of Eden, in the shattered remains of what once was, nestled among scorched plains and crumbling cities, humanity clung to survival with a ferocity born of desperation. The old people's world had been razed by their own hubris, leaving behind only fragments of their knowledge and fears. Among these fears, the most vehement was their dread of the unnatural, mutations wrought by the invisible poisons that permeated the earth, air, and water. In one such remnant, a village named Haven, the people lived by a code as rigid as it was ruthless. The law, a set of commandments derived from fragmented holy texts and the decrees of ancestors, guided their lives. It mandated purity of body, mind, and soul, The deviations, those unfortunate souls marked by any sign of the unnatural, were considered an affront to the divine plan. They were hunted and destroyed, for fear their existence might corrupt the community's sanctity. Elijah, a young farmer with a robust frame and a sharp mind, had known only this way of life. Each day, he worked the fields, the soil beneath his nails a testament to his toil, and each Sabbath, he listened to the preachings of the elders. They spoke of purity and danger, of the holy duty to keep the human form untainted as it was in the days of Eden. However, Elijah's world was upended the day he found Mia by the creek that snaked through the woods beyond his farm. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered subtly in the sunlight, an iridescent sheen that was unmistakably unnatural. Mia was a deviation, one of those spoken of in hushed tones and with spit on the ground. Yet Elijah saw no malice in her clear blue eyes, no wickedness in her gentle demeanor. Over weeks of secret meetings, Mia revealed that she was not alone. There was a group of deviations living in hiding, each marked by strange and wondrous traits. They had tales of communities beyond the wastelands where deviations lived freely, where mutations were seen not as curses, but as variations as natural as the colors of a sunset. Torn between the doctrines of his upbringing and his newfound knowledge, Elijah faced a crisis of faith. He could not reconcile the gentle souls he had come to know with the abominations described by the elders. The realization that the law might be flawed, a tool of control rather than divine decree, was both liberating and terrifying. As Elijah's doubts grew, so did the tension within him. The annual day of purging was approaching, a day dreaded by all who knew the truth of their differences. It was a day of reckoning for any found or suspected to be a deviation. Elijah knew he had to make a choice, silence and safety, or truth and peril. On the eve of the purging, Elijah's resolve crystallized. He could no longer be a party to the atrocities committed in the name of purity. That night, under a cloak of darkness, he led Mia and her kin through hidden paths known only to the woodland creatures and those who dared to defy the law. The journey was fraught with peril. The hunters, enforcers of the law, were relentless. Trained from birth to track and eradicate any and all deviations, their zeal was unyielding. Elijah and his band of outcasts navigated through ruined cities and toxic marshes, each step further from haven and closer to the mythical land of acceptance. After days of harrowing escape, with losses that tore at Elijah's heart, they reached the borders of a community known as the Refuge. Here, the air was filled not with the sharp tang of suspicion, but with the sweet scent of acceptance. Here, mutations were embraced as divine variations, each individual cherished for their unique contributions to the collective strength. As he watched Mia join her peers, her skin catching the light of a setting sun that no longer scorched but soothed, Elijah felt a weight lift from his soul. However, his relief was tinged with sorrow for those left behind. He knew his work was far from over. The refuge was not just a sanctuary, but a beacon of hope, a promise of a world where fear and hatred did not dictate the boundaries of love and acceptance. Elijah turned back towards the wastelands, his heart steeled by purpose. He would return to Haven, armed not with the weapons of a hunter, but with the stories of the refuge. It was time to challenge the elders, to show that the path to Eden was not through purification, but through acceptance. For in the new world, every remnant of humanity, every deviation, was a piece of the puzzle to rebuilding Eden, not as it once was, but as it could be.
Gods of the New Dawn. It began on a Monday, like any other day, except the air tasted like static and the city skyline seemed to tremble under a heavy, brooding sky. I was just a man named Jeremy, with a nondescript job at a tech firm in downtown Chicago. That morning, as I sipped my coffee and stared at my computer screen, a tremor of unease slithered through my spine. The digital numbers on my phone flickered, glitched, then resettled. It was 9:03 a.m. I shook off the discomfort, attributing it to lack of sleep or perhaps too much caffeine. By midday, the city was enveloped in a bizarre, almost electric fog. People whispered about earthquakes, terrorist attacks, but the news reported nothing amiss. That's when I saw them. Figures in the mist, just beyond the glass walls of my office building. They were tall, looming, with eyes that seemed ancient and yet painfully aware. Nobody else noticed, or if they did, they didn't show it. They moved like ghosts of some forgotten era, fading in and out of my vision as if they were phasing through the realities of our world. I left work early, feeling the gaze of those figures piercing through the fog. The streets were chaos, not from panic, but from a strangeness that had everyone on edge. Traffic lights flickered out of sync, and people's smartphones glitched en masse. Amidst this confusion, I heard a voice, ancient and gravelly, like tectonic plates grinding in the deep. "Jeremy," it intoned, making the ground beneath my feet vibrate. I spun around, searching for the source. "You are chosen by the ancients. Help us reclaim what once was ours." Fear rooted me to the spot. I was nobody special. Why me? But as the voice faded, a new one, sharper, younger, like the crisp clarity of a digital bell, filled the air. "Jeremy, resist them. Aid us in forging a path forward, not backward. The old ways are not meant to return." These gods, old and new, were warring, and somehow I was caught in the middle. The old gods, beings of earth, sea and sky, wanted to restore their reign, to reassert their ancient powers over a world that had forgotten them. The new gods were born of our modern world, gods of technology, progress, information, seeking to shape the future, unburdened by the past. As days turned into weeks, the signs grew more ominous. Storms brewed out of season, oceans roared louder, and the earth itself seemed to groan with despair, while technology spiraled into a frenzy of innovation and chaos. Computers developed minds of their own, networks connected in ways that seemed to pulse with sentient intent. I was drawn deeper into their conflict. The old gods visited me in dreams, showing visions of a world lush with the untamed beauty of nature, but darkened by fear and superstition. The new gods sent messages through screens, promising a utopia of unlimited knowledge and control, yet cold and isolating. The climax came one fateful night, under a blood-red moon, an astronomical anomaly not predicted by any scientist. Both factions summoned me to a place where the veil between their realms was thinnest, a clearing outside the city ringed by ancient stones pulsing with power. There, the leaders of the old and new gods appeared before me. Cernunnos, the horned god of the wild, his gaze ancient and compelling. Opposite him, a shimmering figure radiant with circuits and light, its form ever-changing. Naona, goddess of the net. "Choose," Cernunnos rumbled, his voice echoing with the rustle of leaves and the growl of beasts. "Restore balance with us, and bring back the reverence this world has lost." "Evolve with me," Naona countered, her voice a melodic synthesis, "and transcend these primitive fears to reach new heights of understanding and peace." The decision was mine to make. Both offered truths, both offered dangers. I realized then that my role was not to join one side, but to bridge them. Neither could be allowed to win outright, for both were necessary. Balance was not in returning to the past or rushing blindly into the future, but in merging the wisdom of both. With a voice that surprised me in its steadiness, I spoke. "Neither can you exist without the other. The chaos and order, the natural and the constructed must coexist. I choose balance." A silence fell, heavy and profound. The gods looked at each other, and in their eyes I saw a grudging respect. Slowly the world began to right itself. The storm subsided, the tech calmed. It wasn't perfect, balance never is. But it was a beginning. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of new hope, I walked back to the city, the weight of my choice heavy on my shoulders, but with a new understanding of the world's complexities. And thus, under the watchful eyes of the gods of the new dawn, I found my purpose, not as a pawn but as a mediator, forever walking the fine line between the ancient and the modern.
Beneath the crimson sky, it began on a mild spring evening when the first of the red stars appeared, not merely points of light, but orbs of vibrant crimson that pulsed like the heartbeats of celestial titans across the dark tapestry of the night sky. Observatories around the world declared them unknown anomalies, disturbances perhaps born from the chaotic outskirts of the cosmos, yet as I stared from the modest observatory of my backyard, a dread deeper than the mysteries of space began to gnaw at my soul. In the days that followed, society's fascination with these celestial newcomers evolved rapidly into unease. The red stars grew not only in brilliance but in number, until they seemed a new constellation penned by a mad god. My nights became consumed with observations, my days spent in restless study and whispered conversations with colleagues who, like myself, felt the pull of these enigmatic harbingers. One night, the world changed. I had been tracing the path of the most prominent star, now visibly larger, its pulsing more erratic. Suddenly it ceased its heartbeat, and with a burst of unfathomable energy, it vanished from the cosmos. In its place, a faint object, rapidly descending towards Earth, its trajectory ending not far from the outskirts of my home in Sussex. The impact site was obscured by authorities before dawn could even touch the English countryside, yet my insatiable need for answers drove me to the cordoned fields under the cover of darkness. What I discovered there was a scene that would haunt the remainder of my days. A crater, vast and smouldering, lay cloaked under the heavy guard of military and scientific personnel. But it was what resided at the center of this earthly wound that drew my gaze. An object unlike any crafted by human hands. It was large, metallic, and adorned with geometries that defied earthly conventions. A sense of primal fear, the terror of the ancestral prey, took root in me as I hid behind the gnarled trunk of an old oak, watching. Days turned to weeks, and the object remained silent, an enigma of metal and mystery. Then, on a night shadowed by the looming threat of these silent sentinels above, it opened. It was not with a creak nor a groan, but with a seamless parting that seemed to defy the very physics that bound our world. From within emerged not men, not beasts, but shadows cast by nothingness, the forms of obsidian fluidity that moved with purpose and intelligence. These beings, if such they could be called, began to spread across the countryside, their objectives unclear, their destinations unknown. Every encounter with them left people vanished or worse, utterly obliterated, as if erased from existence by mere proximity. The countryside became a ghost of itself, haunted by the specters of these alien intents. I retreated into my study, surrounded by tomes of science and fiction, none of which could offer any explanation or solace. The nights grew oppressive, the sky a permanent tapestry of deep, pulsing reds, casting everything beneath in a sanguine hue that seemed to predict the inevitable end. The silence of the world was what terrified me most. Communication networks faltered, broadcasts ceased, and soon the only sounds were the distant, unexplained tremors that shook the earth and the whispering winds that seemed to carry voices not of this world. Driven by a blend of terror and the insatiable human desire to know, I ventured out once more, this time to the heart of London, now a silent metropolis. The streets were deserted, vehicles abandoned as if their occupants had simply vanished into thin air. Overhead, the red stars watched, unblinking and ever-present. In Trafalgar Square, I came upon them again. The entities moved amongst the shadows of the great city, their forms less distinct, more terrifying than before. I hid beneath the carcass of an overturned bus, my breaths shallow, my heart a hammer against my chest. As I watched, a group of survivors, ragged and desperate, attempted to confront these creatures with weapons of little consequence. The encounter was brief, the aftermath devastating. A wave of unseen force swept through the square, disintegrating all it touched into mere dust that danced in the crimson light. The truth of our insignificance, of our fragile existence, became painfully clear. These beings had not come to conquer but to cleanse, their methods as unfathomable as their origins. What hope did we have against such power, such utter indifference? I write these words now not as a testament to human endurance or as a beacon of hope. I write because in the face of the unknown, in the shadow of great and terrible things, there is little else one can do but bear witness. As the red stars continue to pulse above, I prepare for the end, whatever it may bring, beneath this now forever crimson sky. Thus, in the heart of a silent world, I wait alone with the fear of the unknown and the terror of the extraterrestrial, pondering the enigma of our existence and the possible oblivion that awaits.
Embers and clay. In the cobblestoned heart of 19th century New York, beneath the cacophony of hooves and haggling, my existence unfolded like a whisper forbidden to make a sound. I am of clay, cold, damp clay, animated by ancient rites and whispered prayers. A servant bound to the will of my creator, Rabbi Maya. My purpose was singular and sacred. to protect my master and his flock from the misfortunes of a world not kind to strangers in a strange land. I lumbered through the shadowed alleyways of the Lower East Side, my form too large and too stiff, each step a deliberate thud against the earth. Yet despite my imposing frame, the people scarcely noticed me. To them, I was just another peculiar fixture in the tapestry of the city. It was during one of these nightly patrols that I first encountered him, the Jinni. He flickered in and out of existence by a heap of discarded iron at the back of a blacksmith's forge, his form slender and aglow with an internal fire that shone through his translucent skin. Unlike me, bound by earth and spell, he was a creature of air and flame, bound only by the confines of an old, dented lamp. "Why do you hide in the shadows, creature of clay?" His voice was a melodic chime, stirring the air into warm eddies around us. "I am tasked to protect, not to socialize," I replied, my voice a gravelled growl, unused and harsh. "A sad existence forged by the hands of others," he observed, and in his words I sensed a shared kinship of bondage. We met clandestinely, night after night, beneath the moon's watchful eye. He told me tales of deserts whose sands burned brighter than the sun, of ancient magic so powerful they could command the very stars to dim. In return, I spoke of the solace I found in the silent streets, in the rhythmic echo of my footsteps against the city's vastness. Our friendship, unlikely as it was, forged a new understanding within me. I was no longer merely a sentinel of shadows. I was a being capable of connection, of perhaps understanding the pulsing beat of human hearts. But peace is often a prelude to upheaval. The city, alive with innovation, buzzed with fears of creations like me, golems, automatons, and other semblances of artificial life, rising against their creators. One chilling evening, as frost claimed the city's edges, those fears manifested not merely in hushed whispers, but in violent confrontation. A mob, fueled by fear and spurred by rumour, cornered us in an alley, their faces twisted in anger and terror. "Monsters!" they cried. "Abominations against nature!" Tools and torches raised high, emulating the ferocity of their words. The Jinni, unaccustomed to fear, bristled with a fire that could consume us all. "Shall we show them what monsters can do?" he hissed, his eyes wild with the dancing flames within. I placed a heavy clay hand upon his shoulder, feeling the heat of his fury beneath my palm. "No," I said, my voice steady as the earth itself. "We shall not become the horror they fear." With a roar of effort, I tore a lamppost from the ground, swinging it with the force of my clay-born strength. Not to strike, but to awe, to create a barrier between us and them. Metal groaned and sparked as it hit the cobblestones, a line drawn stark and irrefutable. The crowd halted, the front lines faltering under my gaze, their eyes reflecting the flicker of the Jinni's flame and the immutable solidity of my form. We were not their enemies, but neither were we their kin. "Go back to your homes," I commanded, my voice echoing off the close buildings, a rumble of stone and decree. "We are not the death of your world. We are merely its unseen guardians, its hidden allies." Reluctantly, warily, the mob dispersed, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. As the Jinni and I stood alone beneath the waning moon, the air crisp with the residue of confrontation, he glanced at me with a newfound respect. "You have a warrior's heart, Golem," he said softly, his flame subdued, his form less imposing but more magnificent. "And you," I replied, "have a poet's soul, Jinni. Let us hope this city learns to see beyond the clay and the flame." As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the world in hues of gold and amber, I felt the earth beneath my feet and the air around me thrum with the promise of understanding. Together, we walked back into the labyrinth of the city. Two improbable friends, guardians not just of the physical but of the possibility of coexistence between worlds seen and unseen. In the heart of the city, amidst fear and fascination, our unlikely alliance stood testament to the potential for harmony in a world teetering on the brink of fear and wonder. Silent eyes. When my grandmother passed away, she left me a doll, an antique with glassy eyes and a porcelain face painted with meticulous care to resemble a child's innocent gaze. It was a beautiful yet eerie artifact, tucked away in a corner of her attic, wrapped in yellowed newspaper that crumbled at the touch. The first time I saw it, a shiver darted up my spine, an involuntary whisper of unease. My grandmother had always been a collector of curios, each with its story, usually dark and twisted. This doll, however, came with no story, only an insistent stare that seemed almost accusative. The house was old, filled with the creaks and groans of settling wood, especially at night. It was during these quiet hours that I first heard the footsteps, light, pattering footsteps, like those of a child running barefoot across the hardwood floor. I told myself it was just the house settling, the nocturnal symphony of an aging structure. But then things began to move. Not just small, inconsequential items, but things like chairs, books, and once a heavy vase that had been in my family for generations. Each morning I'd find the doll sitting nearby, its glassy eyes seeming to watch the aftermath of these nocturnal activities. My skepticism began to crumble when I found the doll in my bedroom. I had left it downstairs, I was sure of it, but there it sat, on the foot of my bed, staring at me as I woke. That morning, the air was thick with the stench of old wet earth, and the doll's porcelain face seemed to smirk. Fueled by a mix of fear and curiosity, I began to investigate the doll's origins. My research led me to a dusty old shop on the outskirts of town, where the shopkeeper, a gnarled old man with eyes as glassy as the doll's, finally told me its story. The doll had belonged to a child long ago, a little girl who had died under mysterious circumstances. Her parents had the doll made to resemble her, hoping to immortalize their daughter's image. But tragedy befell anyone who owned it thereafter. It seemed the spirit of the child, or something darker masquerading as such, clung to the effigy. With each word from the shopkeeper, a cold dread settled over me. I needed to get rid of the doll. That decision, once made, seemed to anger the spirit. The disturbances grew worse, more violent. Doors would slam shut, the sound of sobbing echoed through the halls at night, and the doll would always be there, watching. In desperation, I took the doll back to the shopkeeper, hoping he would take it back, but he refused, his face pale as he backed away from me. "It's yours now," he whispered, his voice quivering. "Only you can end it." That night, the storm was fierce. Thunder rolled and lightning flashed like the wrath of gods, illuminating the doll that now sat on my kitchen table. I could hear it, the faintest sound of laughter, as if the doll found amusement in my terror. In a final act of defiance, I grabbed the doll and threw it into the fireplace. The porcelain cracked, the painted lips twisted in what looked like a scream. As it burned, the house fell silent. The storm outside seemed to calm, and for a moment, peace was restored. But peace, I learned, is often temporary. Weeks passed with no incident, and I began to feel relief, thinking the curse was broken. Until one day, while walking through town, I passed a window display in a toy store. There, sitting among the plush bears and wooden trains, was the doll. Its face had been repainted, the cracks expertly filled, but those eyes, those silent, accusing eyes, they hadn't changed. I ran from the store, heart pounding, knowing deep down that it wasn't over. The doll had returned, and with it, the curse. Now I see those silent eyes everywhere. In every reflection, every shadow at night, I feel watched. The fear never leaves me, it festers, grows, an unending nightmare from which I cannot wake. I know it waits for me, biding its time. And I know one day it will return to claim what it believes is owed. Until then, I watch and wait for the silent eyes that haunt my dreams.
Depths unknown. In the quaint seaside town of Marlin's Bay, the relentless Atlantic waves whispered tales of dread that only the old fishermen believed. With generations anchored in the salty embrace of the ocean, these old souls muttered warnings of something lurking beyond the breakers, dismissed as the fanciful delusions of weathered minds. On a radiant morning in July, when the sun painted the horizon in hues of gold and amber, young Eli Reynolds stood on the creaking pier, casting his line into the glistening water. The town buzzed with the arrival of tourists, lured by the charm of seaside festivities and the promise of Marlin's Bay's legendary giant marlins. But that morning, Eli felt a tug on his line unlike any marlin's fight. With a rush of adrenaline, he braced against the pull, only for the line to snap, sending a chill down his spine. Something massive had lurked beneath, something unknown. The news of Eli's mysterious encounter rippled through Marlin's Bay, sparking debates in the local pub. But it was only when darkness fell 3 days later that the sea revealed its grim secret. The moon, a pale observer, cast its light over the water as screams shattered the night's calm. A family on a late evening swim had vanished, leaving behind a scarlet trail that bled into the ocean's depths. Sheriff Ann Cooper, a skeptic hardened by years of coastal life, initiated a search, her resolve as unyielding as the cliffs surrounding Marlin's Bay. Dive teams scoured the ocean floor, fishermen patrolled the waters, yet the sea offered no clues, only swallowing what was thrown into its silent depths. As days stretched into a tense week, the creature struck again. This time, a boat capsized, found adrift with claw marks gouged into its hull, an eerie testament to the creature's brute force. The town's frenzy turned to terror. Tourists fled, leaving behind half-built sandcastles and the echo of laughter, now replaced by a suffocating silence. Fueled by fear and the need to protect her town, Sheriff Cooper enlisted the help of Dr. Lena Hartman, a marine biologist with a penchant for the cryptic lore of the ocean. Armed with sonar equipment and underwater cameras, they embarked on a mission to unveil the monster of Marlin's Bay. The sea was a realm of perpetual twilight, where every shadow betrayed the presence of the unknown. As Lena and Anne patrolled the waters, the sonar beeped erratically, a frantic heartbeat in the abyss. The camera, tethered to their boat, plunged into the colder, darker waters, sending images of a world alien and untouched. Then, without warning, an immense silhouette emerged on the monitor. Its body was elongated, serpent-like, with scales that shimmered like a slick oil spill. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were as black as the deepest sea trench, devoid of soul or mercy. "This can't be," Lena whispered, her voice a mix of horror and fascination. "It's reminiscent of prehistoric leviathans, thought long extinct." Determined to prevent another attack, they hatched a plan. Using a combination of chum and electronic signals, they aimed to lure the creature into a cove, trapping it long enough to study and perhaps find a way to drive it away from Marlin's Bay permanently. The night of the trap was tense with anticipation. The town's remaining residents huddled in their homes while Anne and Lena, aboard their vessel, waited in the cove. Hours ticked by. The sea, cruel in its beauty, remained calm, almost mocking. Then, in the early hours, the water erupted in a fury of foam and spray. The creature, lured by the bait, thrashed violently as it entered the cove. The women acted swiftly, deploying nets and electronic barriers, but the creature's strength was formidable. It slammed against the obstacles, its body coiling around them with terrifying ease. Anne, heart pounding, grabbed a harpoon. With a primal yell, she launched it into the creature's thick hide. The beast recoiled, its scream a sound so otherworldly it froze the blood of those who heard it. The struggle continued, waves crashing furiously, until finally the creature, wounded and perhaps understanding the futility of its assault, retreated into the deeper waters, leaving behind a trail of ink-black blood. In the aftermath, Marlin's Bay was left to ponder the existence of such monsters, both in the ocean and in themselves. Eli, haunted yet fascinated, would spend countless mornings on the pier, staring into the depths, wondering if the creature would ever return. Sheriff Cooper and Dr. Hartman, their bond forged in the fires of that night, patrolled the waters, vigilant and ever watchful. Marlin's Bay had survived, its people bound tighter by the shared memory of the night they faced the unknown. But the ocean is a vast, untamed force, its secrets as deep and dark as the abyss itself. And in the depths, unknown to all, the creature healed, its legend now etched into the lore of Marlin's Bay, a whispered warning of the darkness that dwells beneath the waves. The silhouettes within. In the small, picturesque town of Elmridge, tranquility was a prized possession, one that its residents guarded fiercely against the rumble of the outside world. That serenity was shattered one crisp autumn night when a series of faint meteor showers illuminated the sky. The townsfolk marveled at the spectacle, unaware of the insidious force that descended amongst them, cloaked in the guise of stardust. Dr. Helen Carter, Elmridge's most trusted physician, was the first to notice the oddities. It began subtly. A patient who forgot a lifelong allergy. another who couldn't recall the names of their favorite childhood pets. These incidents were initially dismissed as stress or fatigue, but the frequency and strangeness of these memory lapses grew. Concerned, Helen began documenting each case, her notes quickly forming a pattern too consistent to be coincidental. The transformations escalated in intimacy and terror. Friends and families began to report their loved ones as off. They looked the same, spoke in the same voice, but their essence was different. Helen experienced this chilling realization firsthand when she visited her colleague, Dr. Eric Reynolds. Eric, once vibrant and warm, now carried a detached, almost rehearsed interaction. When Helen recounted a shared memory from medical school, Eric's eyes, usually brimming with nostalgia, showed a fleeting, unsettling blankness. As more reports surfaced, Helen tried to rationalize the phenomena scientifically, but the aberrations defied all logical explanations. The situation became undeniable when she was confronted by the unaltered fear in her neighbor, Mrs. Jacobs. "They're not who they appear to be," she whispered urgently, a quiver in her voice. "They're replacing us, one by one, and nobody's noticing." Driven by a mixture of fear and duty, Helen reached out to her old friend, Sheriff Tom Bradley. Together, they convened a covert meeting with the still untouched townsfolk. The air was thick with paranoia. Everyone was suspect, every cough or stumble a possible signal of alienation. As the group strategized, Helen couldn't shake the horror of the implications. How do you fight an enemy that steals not just lives, but identities? How do you protect your essence, your memories, your very soul? The emotional core of their community was being hollowed out, replaced by hollow replicas devoid of genuine human emotion. One night, determined to find answers, Helen and Tom followed a suspicious group into the woods. Hidden under the canopy, they stumbled upon a horrifying scene. Several townspeople, seemingly in a trance, standing around a bizarre, pulsating organic pod. One by one, the pods opened, revealing duplicates that were perfect in every physical aspect. The realization hit them with the force of a thunderclap. The meteors weren't meteors at all, but vessels carrying an alien species capable of replicating human forms, consuming the original and taking their place. The pods were the incubators for this sinister replication process. Armed with this knowledge, they attempted to rally the town, but who would believe such an outlandish tale? With each passing day, more and more of Elmridge's residents were replaced. Trust eroded into a crippling fear. The community was being suffocated by an invisible, unspoken dread. The story culminated in a desperate final stand. Helen, Tom, and a few others who believed or had seen too much to deny fortified themselves in the local hospital, setting up a last line of defense. They knew their chances were slim, but the fight was about more than survival. It was about preserving the human spirit. In the dead of night, under a new moon, their fears were realized. The duplicates, devoid of human sentiment, converged on the hospital. Helen and her group fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered, and their efforts to disrupt the invasion seemed futile. As the night wore on, Helen found herself back-to-back with Tom, defending the remnants of their humanity. It was then, in her darkest moment, that she understood the true horror was not the loss of life, but the loss of what made life meaningful. Love, memories, connections, all the nuances that constituted human identity. The sun rose over a quiet Elmridge. From the outside it appeared peaceful as ever, but the vibrancy that once characterized the town was gone, replaced by an eerie calm. The silhouettes within had taken over, indistinguishable from their human templates, yet void of the essence that truly defined them. And somewhere in the depths of space, the cold stars watched in silence, indifferent to the quiet tragedy below.
Thank you for watching, and remember, the darkness awaits. Until our paths cross again, stay fearful and stay subscribed.